market, much of its bauxite, the raw material that is used to make aluminum foil, has historically come from Jamaica, no longer from Jamaica because it's been mined, it was mined out of business basically, and Guyana. Right? So these are two places in the Caribbean context where raw materials, as an example, were mined from those countries using local labor, and which in terms of profit, earn millions and billions of dollars, right, for these corporations, Alcan being one of them, and the major one in the Canadian context, and without contributing in a dramatic way to those local economies in those contexts. So it's part of a way of seeing how the economies of the Caribbean and Canada are tied in ways that, for want of jobs in that context, people come here to work, right? So it's not just that people are coming here looking for jobs and looking for handouts. Canada has benefited dramatically from its relationship to the Caribbean. The same can be said of Canadian banks historically, where Canadian banks, like the Royal Bank as an example, has benefited tremendously and has a long-standing historical relationship in the Canadian context. And it's a little-known fact that in many respects, Canadian banks have actually been more dominant in the Caribbean context, and not just in the Anglophone Caribbean, but up until the Cuban Revolution, also in Cuba, also in the Dominican Republic and other parts of the Caribbean.
And me being the second oldest, I did most of the hard work, the more labor to help my family out. And as much as I did things, a lot of things weren't right. I was very much abused. The family that I was left with, they physically, verbally, and mentally abused me as a child. And things didn't get better for me. I got myself into a lot of trouble as a kid, without a father, without a mother in my life. I got myself into violence. Kids tried to hurt me. I lost a young sister just before I come to this country. I saw her got murdered by the family member I was staying with. It was very difficult for me to express myself because I was taken away before seeing the body get buried. I ended up lashing out in society. I ended up lashing out in schools. Things didn't go the way how I thought. I couldn't speak French or English like the other French kids and English kids. My tongue was very much broken, so people didn't understand what I was saying, and I didn't understand what they were saying. So there was a lot of violence, verbally and physically, where I couldn't express myself and didn't find understanding how to express myself. Going from school to school with these troubles, it didn't help me, because I didn't have nobody to look up to.
The lives of younger black women and men, youth, who have found themselves in a kind of hostile environment in this society, that in many respects, many of them have become sort of refuse of the society and live what has been described as wasted lives. Now, not of their own doing, but because they've arrived in a context in which their presence is unwanted, especially in large numbers, seen as, their presence is seen as a threat to the Canadian way of life. Unlike other groups that migrate here who happen to be white, their very presence is visible. And even in terms of their relationship to the wider society, right? Seen as literally physically changing the makeup of the society.
Well, racial profiling is something that's endemic, I guess, to city life in Montreal in terms of black communities and also in terms of Filipino communities, generally in terms of visible minorities. It's something that has existed for an extremely long time in this city, and it's just very tangible. If you actually are spending time living and working in communities of color, you can really see the huge effect that it actually has on people's lives. Like, there's statistics that can describe things for you. Like, black people are 2 times more likely to be arrested than anybody else in Quebec, and 4 times more likely to be stopped and having questions asked to them, or asked for identification and things like this. So that sounds bad on a statistical level, but if you actually think about what that means in terms of the way that racial profiling actually occurs, it's so much in terms of policing people's access to public space. Youth are learning firsthand what violence looks like and what injustice looks like from the very society that's supposed to be representing them and taking care of them. Some youth respond by feeling really angry, which is an anger that I think is extremely justified, and I think that we actually need to give a lot of value to, because it's a really human reaction to being dehumanized on a day-to-day level like this. And I think that some of the other things that happen is it actually just starts to affect people so much that they don't see any alternative, and you start to see also just this hopelessness and this acceptance of the way that this happens.
Years later on, I found myself with somebody I fall in love with in school. It was my valedictorian, my first baby mother, the first woman I fall in love with. We lasted 14 years. We have a son together. He's 16 years old now. I'm very proud of him, as much as I haven't had a chance to be a good father for him because of the past and how things have played out on me as being a father. I've been intoxicated for 4 years, 2004. I was locked down for quite some time. I came out 2006. I've seen the light, being inside the jail, away from the people I love. Having to know that that's not what I want of myself, and to be away for so long, it made me change.
Young black men and young blacks in general represent a disproportionate number in the entire prison system, right? In the legal justice system, right? Because they're living in a society that is hostile to their presence and has not willingly made a place for their presence in this society.
Communities of color aren't alone, and teenagers of color aren't alone in the fact that they are prone to shoplifting and getting into small fights and maybe selling dime bags of weed on the corner, this kind of thing. It's not as if it's something that exists only in communities of color. It's just that because there's so much more surveyed, there's so much more surveillance in terms of the communities that they're living in, is that a lot of things that we see as like problems with the youth of color are actually just general societal problems that youth who are acting out take part in. Because these youth are so much likely to be arrested and to be incarcerated and to end up going through the judicial system so early, we see it as a problem of youth of color instead of just seeing it as a problem of criminalizing our youth. Not that there's more youth criminals, but that they're turned into criminals because they're youth of color, because they're black.
So the federal government is spending $3 billion, more than $3 billion, to construct 22 new provincial prisons. They're expanding 17 provincial prisons, and they're expanding 34 of the federal prisons. And they're passing all this new legislation to fill those beds. So one of the big ones that just got a lot of news was Bill C-10. Bill C-10 raises the mandatory minimums for a whole bunch of different sentences, and also makes it harder for people to get out on parole. So if you're inside and you're trying to get out on parole and you get denied parole, now you have to wait a year or more to see the board again before you can get out. They've also changed it so that if you're out on parole and the police pick you up, they don't have to talk to your parole officer before they throw you back in prison. So a lot of laws like this are changing in order to fill the beds that the federal government is building in these prisons.
Since I came out 2006, I've been a new man. I've got 2 wonderful sons with a new woman. They're the star of my eyes. I also have 2 other sons that are hers, that are also mine. I'm a father to 4 other kids, and I'm very happy and glad that somebody loved me for who I am. Because in the past, I didn't have love, and I didn't know who I was. So I embraced this opportunity with this new life, and the kids, they mean so much to me as being a father, the joy they bring when I come home at work or come home from a stressful day. And I'm so glad that I have that chance to make up, to them and make up to myself, to be a father again. Yeah, coming out wasn't easy for me. It was something that I thought it was gonna go beautiful because I've served some time. And unfortunately, while we were together, 2009, the immigration came and visit me at my home, and they let us know that I'm gonna be deported. It was very hard for me because I served time inside Bordeaux, RDP. I even got moved to Quebec because the the population in the jail was too much people. So I spent 12 months or 8 months in Quebec, which it was extremely more hard because there's no indigent canteen, there's no really help. And we're set when you don't have nobody, family members to come so far to give you help or to give you love or attention. You become more suppressed. And that had happened to me while I was inside, and coming out and facing this pain again, you know, knowing the fact that I'll be taken away from my family and I don't know when I'm coming back or what my life is gonna be like. I felt lost. I felt also punished for 2 or 3 more times because I've been inside, and since I've come out, I haven't done nothing wrong to really show society that I'm that person who I was once. And it really hurts me that I've worked so hard. I've taken programs, I've got more involved in my community, in my church.
So the idea of double punishment is that you're being penalized once through legal system and then once through immigration system. It applies for non-citizens, so permanent residents, refugee claimants, refugees, anyone who doesn't fit the category of citizenship, who's been in jail for 6 months or more through a federal crime. This was implemented in 2001 by the Liberals. They replaced the 25-year-old immigration regime with the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. And they included a section that talks about serving time in jail and then facing deportation as a consequence. Immigration Minister Jason Kenney stated that immigrants non-citizens who face more than 6 months in jail will be deported immediately as soon as they come out.
Je trouve que c'est pas juste ce que le gouvernement y pense puis comment il agit, parce qu'il faut donner quand même une deuxième chance à quelqu'un qui a quand même vécu 30 années ici au Canada. Puis je sais pas pourquoi il décide maintenant même pour déporter tous les immigrants que au moins il a gardé sa paix, tu sais, il a pas rien fait de mal, il a pas fait le vol qualifié, il a pas frappé quelqu'un. Il a tout respecté qu'est-ce qu'il fallait depuis que moi et lui on était ensemble. Il a pas fait de vol non plus. Alors, je trouve ça vraiment injuste comment le gouvernement y pense. Alors, parce que là, pour toutes les personnes qui sont bien en leur couple, en famille, tout ça, il faut donner quand même une deuxième chance de remettre leur vie en valeur encore plus.
So the government isn't just building prisons, they're also building immigration detention centers. So there's a thing that happens where people get out of a prison if they've done time and get taken across the street, in Montreal, across the street literally, to the immigration detention center to face deportation. And I think those two facilities fit together in this way of trying to control people, trying to force people out of this country, trying to keep people under surveillance. There's a lot of connections between CSIS and the police in terms of watching people who are out on parole or watching people who are without papers or waiting deportation. All of that kind of stuff fits together in this broader picture of trying to control people and trying to surveil people.
That means is that even if people have grown up here with their entire families who are maybe at different levels of achieving citizenship, that just for being convicted of what is termed serious criminality, even though that's the seriousness of that criminality is not necessarily connected to what we might actually consider to be serious or threatening or extremely violent, say. So then you see a large amount of people being taken away from their families and sent actually back to places that they have never spent any time, that they don't know, that are not their homes. So in terms of being given a second chance, which is something that we see as how the Canadian justice system functions, this is not true for people who don't have their full citizenship, even if they live here and all their families are here and their lives are here.
Right, so we almost have 2 categories of non-citizens: those who are citizens but become non-citizens in terms of how they are treated, and those who are not citizens officially in terms of their papers, right? Who are not only treated as non-citizens, but have been forced to leave the country as quote-unquote non-Canadians.
Around just before Christmas, they called us in and let us know that the decision was made. I'm going to be taken away from my family. They didn't explain when, but they asked me to collaborate and took some pictures for a passport, which I have done. I've been waiting.